All right, so here we are for lucky week 13.
Da-na-na.
We are going to do football movies in honor of this being week 2 of the NFL. We are going to do football movies. Wayne and I obviously are huge Bears fans. People that know us know that, and we're
Bear down, Chicago Bears. I don't know the rest of the words to the song.
I think Wayne started last week, but I'm going to let him go this week because one of his movies ties into the Chicago Bears. So Wayne, get started.
All right. My first pick of week 13, football movies. Brian Song, 1971, directed by Buzz Kulick, starring James Cameron, Billy D. Williams, Jack Warden, Bernie Casey, and several of the Chicago Bears players also made little cameos and whatnot in behind-the-scenes action of this movie. So, why did I choose Brian Song? Not only because it stars or focuses on the Chicago Bears, but it's also one of the greatest made-for-TV movies I have ever seen. Little description of the movie here. Gale Sayers joins the Chicago Bears and is befriended by Brian Piccolo, an overachieving running back competing for the same position. Although they compete for the same spot on the team, and despite the fact that Sayers is black and Piccolo is white, they become roommates on the road and very close friends, especially when Sayers is injured and Piccolo helps him recover. Later, they and their wives must both deal with the harsh reality of Brian Piccolo's cancer. James Caan and Billy D. Williams are absolutely superb in this movie. This is one of the cliched quote that this is the only movie men are allowed to cry at. Blah blah blah. Masculine. Watch me chop down a tree and shoot an animal. Type thing. It is a very emotional movie. You really connect and feel with both the Gale Sayers character and Brian Piccolo's character through the performances by Caan and Williams. I don't really have anything negative to say about it. I mean, for the time, it was made in 1971. There's a little bit of a cheese factor with just, how stuff was shot in the 70s in the style. But overall, if you have not seen Brian's Song, definitely check it out. You can find it on most places you rent movies. Make sure it's the 1971 version. There was a remake in the late 90s, early 2000s with Mekhi Phifer.
Yep.
It just didn't connect on the same level, so...
Interesting enough, it was also a remake, made-for-TV remake. You don't get a lot of those these days.
Yes.
I've never seen that one, so I'll have to definitely catch that, because I know as a Bears fan and just as a fan of football, I probably should have seen it by now.
Right. Everybody should know the name Gale Sayers. He's kind of overshadowed by Walter Payton as the greatest running back in Chicago Bears history, and in my opinion, the greatest running back of all time. Sorry, Emmitt Smith.
I concur.
Barry Sanders, hey.
I would actually put Barry ahead of Emmett, in my opinion, just because when I saw Barry run, he reminds me, watching old footage of Walter, Barry reminds me of Walter a lot.
Absolutely. And that's not to take anything away from him. It's just a great running back,
yes.
But he also had one of the best offensive lines of football his whole career, and, he just had more assets. I would love to have seen Barry Sanders or Walter Payton on that Cowboys team and seen if the numbers were comparable, and I'm sure they would be, if not more superior. But
yes.
So, not to overshadow everything with Bears talk, so
Bears.
What is your number one pick for this week, sir?
So, number one, I'm going to go with, it's a little more, it's not as heavy as the one that you just chose. It's a little more lighthearted. It's The Replacements from 2000, starring Keanu Reeves and Gene Hackman, along with Orlando Jones, Jon Favreau, who keeps making appearances on our show, Brooke Langton, and Rhys Ifans, who's a British actor, or Welsh actor. Everybody knows him from, Notting Hill. He's usually just the funny, goofy guy. He's been in some serious roles, too.
I'm
Larry. A fictional pro football league finds themselves hit with a player strike with the season still needing to be finished. Washington Sentinels owner Edward O'Neill, played here by Jack Warden, calls a former coach of his, Jimmy McGinty, telling McGinty that he and the rest of the teams are going to finish the final 4 games of the season with replacement players. O'Neill asked McGinty to coach the Sentinels the rest of the season, along with the pressure of winning 3 of the last 4 games to make the playoffs. McGinty accepts on the condition that he also be given the freedom to sign the players he wants, with O'Neill not allowed to interfere. McGinty, played by Gene Hackman, he goes out and he puts together this ragtag team of college football players that, were, to quote the movie, "You're not even a has-been, you're a never was." And all these are a bunch of never wases. They played high school, college football, and when he was a scout or a coach, he scouted these players, and so he wants to put them on a football team. The biggest one being Shane Footsteps Falco, played by the lovable Keanu Reeves.
National treasure, sir.
He is a national treasure, that's for sure. And he lacks confidence, to say the least. He was a college football player who played in, I think it was like the Sugar Bowl or something, and they call him Footsteps because he got nervous because he was about to be sacked, and he ended up costing people a lot of money, and he's kind of never lived that down. So he works on boats for a living. That's where McGinty finds him. Puts together a team of a bunch of other players. John Favreau is a cop who becomes like the stud linebacker. There's a former prisoner played by Michael Jace, who oddly enough is actually in prison now for murder. Orlando Jones, though, probably one of the bright spots of the supporting characters. He's really funny. He started out everyone knowing him from the 7-Up commercials, but also
make 7-Up yours.
He was also on Mad TV. He's very funny. He's great in this movie as Clifford Franklin, the receiver that has a hard time catching the football. And it's just it's really cheesy. So that it fits in that regard of what you talked about with Brian Song. It's cheesy in a different respect, though. It's more cheesy comedy than cheesy drama. And it just tells a really fun story of, it's supposed to be somewhat loosely based on the strike of the 80s in the NFL and replacement players. And these players are treated as scabs. They get, booed, yelled at by the other players who don't want to pay for the little pay that they're getting, which obviously nowadays we know NFL players are paid very well.
Right. Brett Cullen is masterful as Eddie Martell.
He is. He is.
Replaced quarterback. It's funny that you bring up the strike of 84, I believe?
I think so. I can't remember the exact day. It was around there.
There is a ESPN documentary, 30 for 30, called Scab, which is absolutely fantastic. So if you are a football fan, definitely check out the ESPN film Scab. ESPN 30 for 30.
Yes, I've heard of that. I haven't watched it yet. This movie, when it came out, though, it wasn't loved by critics, but it seemed to be a hit with fans almost immediately. I think it did decent box office, but then when it came to home videos, I think when it really took off, I started watching it again last night just to kind of familiarize myself with it, but I've seen it probably a handful of times, so it's just a very charming movie. It is very 90s, even though it came out in 2000. It has a very 90s feel to it. The music is very 90s. The style, it looks very 90s. But it's good. It's just a fun movie. There's nothing, nothing serious about it. It reminds me a lot of the other football comedies that, we'll have in the honorable mentions and stuff.
Mm-hmm. It's comparable to, it's not as over the top to Waterboy.
Yes.
But it's got a certain level of goofiness to it.
The perfect thing I could say about it, the perfect comparison I can make about this movie is that it's a little bit less funny football version of Major League. Like, there aren't as many quotable lines in this one as there are in Major League, but that's exactly what they were going for. They wanted to make a football movie that was Major League. It's directed by Howard Deutsch, the husband of Leah Thompson and father of Zoe Deutsch, who we've talked about on this podcast before. And he directed Some Kind of Wonderful, movie I talked about as well. Love that movie. Just thought I'd mention that again. But yeah, it's a really good movie. If you haven't seen it, I do recommend it. It is available to stream on HBO Max if you have that. If not, you could rent or buy it. I think right now it's real cheap. It's like $5 to buy on Amazon. So I would say check it out.
Yep. Definitely one of my favorites.
If you're a Keanu Reeves fan, it's great for that. Jack Warden, I really love him in these sports movies. He plays in quite a few of them, and he's really good here. And so Gene Hackman, we didn't know back in 2000 that this was going to be one of Gene Hackman's final roles before he retired, because he retired like 4 years later, I think, after unfortunately Welcome to Mooseport. But yeah, it's not, it's obviously not his best movie, but he does really good work here, and it's just a fun movie. Lots of good, funny sequences. Rhys Ifans is definitely the comic relief in this movie as the Welsh kicker with a bad gambling streak as well.
Also, the tight end, Denham, the hearing impaired.
from
one of the first times that's actually been highlighted in a film.
Yes.
Like sports-wise and whatnot, and shows that, just because society may see you as handicapped doesn't mean you can't excel on the athletic.
And that's the main point of his character, right? He makes a comment. Gene Hackman's character makes a comment saying, he would have gone in the first round in the NFL draft if he could hear. That's also good. Yeah, it's just a nice, heartwarming movie too. It doesn't take itself very seriously. Just a fun movie. Check it out. All right, Wayne, what's your number 2?
Yeah. All right, I'm going to keep the James Caan appearances going with 1993's The Program, directed by Brian S. Ward, starring James Caan, Halle Berry, Omar Epps, Joey Lord Adams, Craig Schaefer, Christy Swanson makes an appearance, Abraham Ben Ruby is probably my favorite character of this one as Bud Light Kaminsky, and Dwayne Davis as, I believe it's Alonzo Mack. What is something about linebackers named Mack just appeals to me for some reason. Chicago, bear down. So this is a movie about a college football program where several players from different backgrounds try to cope with the pressures of playing football at a major Division I university. Each player deals with pressures differently, turning to drinking, others to drugs, some to studying, and others to performance-enhancing drugs. So this is probably one of the most honest movies. I would compare this one to Any Given Sunday with just the behind the scenes, what appears to be real life stuff that goes on with, steroids and drugs, and how some colleges and universities cater to their stars and changing grades and giving them financial benefits. There's not a ton of that I know of college movies out there about college football, like that go this in depth behind the scenes. There's cover-ups of sexual assault. There's backstabbing between teammates, fighting. One of the like I said about performance-enhancing drugs. There's a starter on defense who only has his position because he's been hitting the steroids really, really hard, and it changes his personality to a point where the coaches have to intervene and say, "Hey, get off the stuff."
That's Latimer, Steve Latimer. I love that character and the trajectory that his character goes on through that movie.
The gentleman that plays Latimer is actually also in Any Given Sunday.
Andrew Bernarski. Yep.
Thank you. I failed to write his name down. Shame on me.
Also played Leatherface a couple of times.
Hey. Sir, are you familiar with this film?
I love this film. This is probably a top 5 football film for me. I chose a couple other ones just because I wanted to focus on 2 of my favorite ones, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I always have been a huge fan of this movie. I don't know, honestly, why. James Caan is great in it. I love the drama in this movie. Joe Kane is a great protagonist.
Kane is able.
He's kind of down on his luck. He comes from not a very good home. His father's kind of a piece of trash. And he doesn't, similar to Keanu Reeves in The Replacements, he lacks the confidence to be as good as he could be. And James Caan's character tries to instill that in him, that if he's confident, he'll be great. And this is like this season they're using it to make him the Heisman Trophy. They're petitioning for him to win the Heisman Trophy in this season because he's that good. But he doesn't know if he lives up to the hype because his dad is always putting him down. And I like how they handle his character. I like his arc. The love story with him and Christy Swanson, who is a tennis player who's recovering from a serious injury, is very good. Back when Christy Swanson wasn't crazy.
I also like how they deal with Omar Epps' character and how they go through the recruiting of a high school star.
Yes. And
how the coaches and the recruiters will promise people the world, and then when it's time to actually arrive and get involved, it's very different from how it was portrayed during the recruitment process. And
what I like about that character, and because there's like a love triangle between him and Ray Griffin, played by J. Leon Pridgeon II, and Halle Berry. And so there's this whole thing going back and forth, and Griffin is the other running back, so he doesn't want Omar Epps' character coming in and taking his spot. But Darnell Jefferson, played by Omar Epps, is supposed to be the next big college running back. So that's what they're petitioning him as. One of my favorite scenes is in the final game. Like, a couple games before, Griffin didn't block for him. And that, they knew that, and it became a big thing. But the final game, when Griffin falls down, and he's like, oh, shit, he's got to get back up, and Darnell's freaking out. He gets up, and he makes that killer block that opens up the hole for Darnell. It was a very, dramatic scene, an emotional scene for a football scene. It was pretty crazy in how they did that, and it works. It's about coming together as a team. And, when you have a team like this, you're going to have your weak parts, and that's where Latimer comes in. Latimer was like a special teams guy. They talk about that. He was a special teams guy the year before, skinnier, and then when we meet Latimer, he's juiced, he's ready, he's strong. Bernarski plays him as kind of a troubled jock who wants to be a star, and he fails the steroid test, and then the end of the season, in the final game, when James Conn looks him in the eyes, he could tell that he's juicing again. And it ends with him basically kicking him off the team. But it's a very just kind of like you said, so it feels realistic. Whether it's as realistic as it is in real life, I wouldn't know. I didn't play college football or even have a chance to I only played a year in high school, so it feels real. And just the way they handled it, I thought it was very well done. Really great movie.
Again, let's also touch on Dwayne Davis's performance as Alvin Mack, not Alonzo, excuse me.
Yes.
And how he's a highly touted college star athlete who has a career-ending knee injury.
Yes, which is obviously got to be tough for somebody.
I would have liked to have seen them go a little bit more detail on, just how they respond to that. But, again, that's not this type of movie. Honestly, it would have been cool to see a spin-off to see how the character kind of, what happens to him.
Yeah.
Because, when star athletes in college, they don't always put the high priority on education. And, I'm stereotyping here, and I don't mean to intentionally do that, but a lot of times, they're so dependent on having a successful career that, you get tunnel vision almost. And
they don't plan for the future, and that's something that a lot of programs are starting to stress now, and I think it's important. And you'll get a lot of NFL players, too, who will go back to school a couple years into the NFL when they feel like they have the time to do it, because they know afterwards they're going to need to be able to do something. And the money's not always going to be there. The friends aren't always going to be there. It shows how, like you said, the tunnel vision, that's a good thing. It shows how you need to have another outlet, because one hit and it's over. And that's, that's your career and you're done. And what do you got left? If you can't, do anything else, you're kind of screwed.
Going back to, ESPN's 30 for 30 again, their biography on athletes that lost their money called Broke. Terrell Owens is on there. Andre Rison, Atlanta Falcons wide receiver.
Yep.
Just, not being wise with your money. And it's not just the NFL. NBA, Major League Baseball, professional athletes. They make the point of saying, you get like a 20-year-old, 21-year-old kid fresh out of college that's never had anything, and you give them millions of dollars and just let them go nuts. I mean, you give them destruction to me.
Before they put the rookie cap in place, you get $50-60 million signing bonus, and it's like, your life has changed. And we all know your life has changed, but it's how you handle that. And that's why people like Chris Carter, who had those type of issues, will go to the rookie symposiums, and they'll talk about these things. And, you got to make sure you got an accountant that manages your money. You don't want to have that guy next to you who's helping you spend your money. You want an accountant that helps you manage your money so you don't go and blow it all. And luckily, he had many of opportunities in his life to bounce back from that. Not everybody's going to get that. And I think that's kind of why he uses that story. He uses himself in that story because he wants people not to do what he did.
Right. And just, not to linger on this, but to think, as the average person, God, getting $50 million. I mean, in my head, I'm like, all right, I'd be set for life. I can take care of these people. I can buy my parents a house. And that's the exact same mindset.
Exists. Oh, totally. Yep.
You think, oh, that's plenty of money. Well, it's like, if you make bad decisions and you surround yourself with
that doesn't even
character.
Yeah, that doesn't even count. Look at MC Hammer. It doesn't count all the people that come around you after you get the money. You're like, hey, I want to be your friend all of a sudden, even though I didn't like you before.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so moving on. I'm going to go to high school, and I'm going to stay in high school for both my next two picks. I'm going to go with the stay in the year 2000, so the same year's replacements, came in one of my favorite football movies of all time, and that is Remember the Titans. Directed by Bo Ziakin.
Left side. Strong side. Sorry, I love that movie too. Please carry on.
It stars Denzel Washington, Will Patton, Donald Faison, Nicole Ari Parker, a bunch of other people in it too. Hayden Panettiere plays the little girl who's like the narrator of the story. In 1981, a group of former football coaches and players attend a funeral. 10 years earlier, in July 1971, at the integrated T.C. Williams High School in Alexandria, Virginia, an African-American head coach, Herman Boone, is hired to coach the school's football team. Boone is assigned to the coaching team under current Caucasian coach Bill Yost, who has been nominated for the Virginia High School Hall of Fame. In an attempt to placate rising racial tensions, he refuses, believing it unfair to Yost, but relents after seeing what it means to the African-American community. Yost is then offered an assistant coach's job by the school board and initially refuses but reconsiders after the Caucasian players pledge to boycott the team if he does not participate. Dismayed at the prospect of the students losing their chances at scholarships, Yost changes his mind and takes up the position of defensive coordinator under Boone, to his daughter Cheryl's dismay. So this movie, it came out 20 years ago, but it's still very timely because it deals with the difficulty that America has had at accepting people of another color. It shouldn't be this hard, but it is. And this movie shows us how it could be done and how everybody could work together and be a team. And it takes time. It doesn't just happen overnight. Herman Boone, played by Denzel Washington, it's based on a true story. So this stuff, for the most part, actually happened, whether it happened the way it does in the movie. Obviously, they always change stuff. He goes about making the defense sit with the offense, or the defense sit with the defense, and the offense sit with the offense, so that the white players and the black players don't segregate themselves from each other. He wants them to commingle so that they, understand when they get to camp. He has them share rooms with each other so they get to know each other, know each other's cultures, know what everybody is like, kind of to get rid of all the racist stereotypes that are out there. There's and he doesn't really have a good turnaround. Is one of the white linemen makes a comment about, what's your father do? Oh, do you have a father? And the character he's talking to, his father is like a lawyer or something. So like his father, it's like, it's just those misconceptions that we have through society that I think have been ingrained there for a long time. And, a lot of us who aren't that way, we hoped, I don't think we're naive enough to think it was over, but we hoped it was getting better. And as we've seen in the last 4 years, unfortunately, it's gotten worse almost. So a movie like this, I think, is very important right now. It shows that it's possible that people can come together. Two of the main characters become best friends, and that, it ends somewhat tragically as we find out the character dies years later. But Ryan Hurst from Sons of Anarchy plays Jerry Bertier. Wood Harris from The Wire plays Julius Campbell. And they're the two linebackers, strong side, left side. They become best friends, brothers, as they would say, and kind of throws everybody else off that's white at first because they don't know how to accept him. And then I think it really takes Gary's mother accepting him for, I'm getting emotional just talking about this movie because it's such an emotional movie, but it takes Gary's mother accepting Julius for everybody else to kind of be like, oh wait, okay, so maybe these people that look different than us aren't that bad. And
there was the issue with Gary Bertier's girlfriend, played by Kate Bosworth. Questioning what he was doing, associating himself with people that, aren't his own. The gentleman that you talked about, the character Ray Buds, played by Burgess Jenkins, who, in my opinion, looked like a very young Brett Favre, but that's besides the point.
He does. So you already hated him.
Yeah, absolutely. Bear down. And let's not forget that Gary Bertier takes steps to get Ray kicked off the team for
not blocking. Not
blocking because
for
the
Rev,
running back's race. Ryan Gosling and his replacement of the character played by Donald Faison, Petey Jones.
Petey Jones, yep.
That's another thing. Or I'm sorry, where Petey replaces Alan's father, the stereotypical white, that's white supremacist, racist.
White, yeah.
By him as, threatens the coach and yells and screams about this. The undertones in this movie are so, even though this movie is 20 years old, based on a movie that's almost 50 years old during the time. And nothing really has gotten better. Like you touched on, it's like, how the hell are we still spinning our wheels? And I don't know if it's, everybody feels enabled because we have a poor leadership.
Yeah. I think that has something to do with it. The fact that he doesn't talk it down at all. He's basically, if he doesn't say anything at all, it's just as bad as saying something at this point, because they feel like that means that he stands for them and stands up for them. But to just go back to the movie, I think one of the best scenes is with Petey. Petey is a passionate player, and he gets upset, and he gets benched on offense by Herman Boone. So then Will Patton's character, the assistant coach and defensive coach, wants to take him and put him on defense. He does well, but then at some point he gets yelled at by Will Patton's character, and so then he benches him. But there's a great scene where Ryan Gosling's character Alan is having a hard time defending one of the players on the other team. It's towards the end of the movie. The coach tells him he's not ready to put Petey back in yet, but he goes to Alan. He goes, "You want him to have your spot? You go give it to him." So there's a really cool moment of like kind of a passing of the torch, like, "Hey, dude, you're way better at this than I am. Go out and get him." And so then Petey takes the field. I believe he gets an interception on that play, turning the tide of the game or whatever. The big thing I didn't talk about, too, is at the beginning, because he's a black coach, he has to win every game that first season or they're going to fire him. If he loses one game, they're going to use that to fire him. So they have to be perfect. And you can tell, like Denzel's character at first, he really wants that because he doesn't. As you can see, when he's named the head coach in the movie, all the neighbors that are surrounding him, which are all African-American neighbors because they all live in like one neighborhood, come out and they're all clapping and cheering. So he has that in the back of his mind, like he can't get fired because of that. But by the end of the season, he's ingrained in these kids, like, it's not about winning. It's about being a team and doing everything together. So even if they lose, he knows he's going to get fired. He's still okay with it at that point because he has brought this team, which was divided at the beginning of the movie, and is now together. And as you could see through the movie, when they talk about Gary Pertier, who unfortunately died in a car accident years later, he did become a Special Olympian, though, because he was paralyzed after the car accident he had. 2 car accidents in his life, major ones anyway, and unfortunately he passed away after the second one. They're meeting at his funeral, and just it shows you how close they still were. And I believe I have to look it up, but I believe Herman Boone and Will Patton's character coached together for several years after that first year. So they became lifelong friends. I believe they both have since passed away. At least Herman Boone, I know, passed away a couple years ago. And it's a great movie. It's taking all the other stuff I said aside, it's just a great sports movie. Denzel Washington is at his best. I mean, when is he not at his best? But he's great in this movie. He's fantastic. I love watching it probably like 3 to 4 times a year. I'll just pop it on because it's such a good movie. Definitely, if you've not seen Remember the Titans, it is on Disney Plus. Check it out. You will not be disappointed. Fantastic film. All right,
fantastic soundtrack too.
Yeah. It does. It sound. Oh, we forgot to mention Louis, played by. We forgot to mention Louis, played by Ethan Suplee. He's the first white character in the movie that doesn't really. I won't say doesn't see race, because that's not the thing to say anymore, and it shouldn't be, because obviously we all see race unless you're colorblind, or blind in general. But he's the first one that doesn't see them as different, and he's there to play football. He doesn't care, and he's a great character. But the Ethan Suplee gets to play. He's obviously since lost a lot of weight since then, but he's a great character actor. I think people don't talk about it enough.
Absolutely. Underrated.
Yes. And then also Kip Pardue is Ronnie Sunshine Bass is great as the backup quarterback to Rev when Rev goes down. And he's looking all California, but he's really good too. He's a really good character. And he's another one. He doesn't really see why there's a problem because he's from California, which even back then were a little more liberal than, Tennessee, and so he doesn't really see why everyone sees the black players as different. And
that's a really powerful scene where he tries to take the boy to the restaurant.
Yep, and they get turned away, and he doesn't.
We aren't allowed in there.
They have to explain it to him. Yeah, it's
fine.
It's a very emotional movie, so if you haven't seen it, be ready to probably cry. All right, Wayne, what's your last one?
All right, my last one is the 2006 film Invincible, directed by Erickson Core, starring Mark Wahlberg, Elizabeth Banks, Greg Kinnear, Kevin Conway. Based on the story of Vince Papale, a 30-year-old bartender from South Philadelphia who overcame a long odds to play for the NFL's Philadelphia Eagles in 1976. This is one of my guiltiest pleasures. Whether or not you've seen this or how you feel about it, anytime I see this movie, I will stop and watch it till the end, no matter where it is. I don't know, it's just the underdog lover in me or what, but it's just a great movie. It starts out with Vince Papale being a substitute teacher who ends up having his position cut due to lack of funding by the public school system. His wife leaves him because she thinks he's a loser, and goes so far as to move out without telling him, taking everything they own and writing a note basically saying, you're a loser, you'll never amount to anything. And Vince Papale's character, played by Mark Wahlberg, keeps this as motivation. Greg Kinnear plays the coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, brand new coach, and he has trying to change the culture of this losing team. He holds open tryouts for anyone who thinks they're good enough to come and play for the Philadelphia Eagles. And this leads to a pretty hilarious montage of guys that look like you and me, Kirky, thinking they can compete with professional athletes.
Yep.
The gentleman who wears the cape, who was interviewed by the reporter, why do you think you can make this team? 2 years? Varsity? It gets absolutely obliterated in the actual drill. And it's not going well. There are guys, dressed in polo shirts and shorts, not in athletic attire at all out there, attempting to play football. And all of a sudden, Vince Papale steps up to run the 40-yard dash and blows the coaches away. He then, I think he runs a few routes, catches a few passes and whatnot, and the coaches end up, saying, all right, that's it. Thank you for coming out. Vince doesn't think he's really made that big of an impression. He's out in the parking lot trying to get his car started. It won't start. When Greg Kinnear's character comes up and, they have an exchange, and the next thing we know, he's got an invite to training camp. The whole, the bar is where, there is their social hangout,
He works there, too.
Works there as well.
Yep.
Elizabeth Banks is the love interest after his wife, Vince Papale's wife, leaves him. She is the niece of the bar owner, who's also a New York Giants fan, so there's animosity there. As much as we dislike the Packers, is the hatred between the Philadelphia Eagles, the New York Giants, and the Dallas Cowboys. Yuck.
All part of the same division. Makes sense, yeah. They all hate each other.
Yeah, and it's a great story of just overcoming adversity and what Vince has to go through to prove himself to not only the coaches but also to himself.
And it's another movie like we talked about with Keanu Reeves in The Replacements and Joe Kane, Craig Schaefer's character in The Program. It's another movie where a person has to kind of believe in themselves in order to get the job done, and it's confidence. It comes down to being confident. He does the tryout. He doesn't feel like he did well enough, but he was like the standout. He was the only one that gets brought in from those tryouts. And he ended up having a pretty, a 9-year career, I want to say, out of it. A pretty successful NFL career, mainly like a special teams guy, but still, I mean, if you can make a career out of it, man, go for it. And Vince Papale, it's definitely a very inspirational story. This movie has a great supporting cast. Kirk Acevedo plays one of his buddies. It's really good. Another movie about a bastard father. His dad is just kind of an a-hole. And it's... Again, you're right. It's a feel-good movie. It's another one that's on Disney Plus, along with Remember the Titans. So go check those two out if you haven't seen them.
Time out. Whose dad is an a-hole?
Mark Wahlberg's dad.
No, Mark Wahlberg's dad is supportive.
Is it? I thought he was an a-hole.
After his mom dies. Remember, that's what got me thrown up years at the factory.
Oh, I thought he was a bastard. I thought he was an alcoholic.
Oh, no, I thought they had a really emotional connection there and whatnot.
All right,
maybe he was, and I just maybe I missed those undertones, but...
I don't know. Maybe his dad... Okay, back on. Maybe his dad's a bastard, maybe he's not. I don't really remember. It's been a little bit since
just because...
His dad is struggling.
What's the line that says so? Just because I don't want you to get your hopes up doesn't mean I don't have my hopes up.
Maybe that's what it is. Yeah, his dad is. I guess his dad isn't very inspirational because he's been beaten down in life, but maybe he's not such a bastard, like I said. So I'll take that part back.
The highlight of the film, though, is when he calls his buddy, who is also down in his luck, his factory's on strike, to come and jump his car. And the friend arrives, like, when's the last time you went a week without having to jump this thing? And then he goes through checking. All right, your battery connection's good. Everything looks good. You sure this thing won't start? And Mark Wahlberg calls him out, to let him know first that he actually made the Philadelphia Eagles. And you talk about getting emotional. I'm getting a little emotional right now.
Yeah, no, I'm getting goosebumps from that. I know what you're talking about.
You're a frickin' Eagle, ain't you? Frickin' Philadelphia Eagle! He's got the 40, the 30, the 20. So.
It's a real good scene, yeah. No, it's real good. All right, so before I get to my final film, which is arguably my favorite football film, I'm going to list some honorable mentions here. Heaven Can Wait with Warren Beatty. I just saw that one recently for the first time. Very good movie. The Longest Yard with Burt Reynolds and also the Adam Sandler one. We've talked about them before. Both very good movies. We Are Marshall with Matthew McConaughey. Another very emotional film.
Yep.
Necessary Roughness. It was another like major league type football comedy, more closer to spoof, but it's not a spoof. It's basically to me the same movie as The Program, but funny.
Mm-hmm.
Varsity Blues and Any Given Sunday. We talked about both those in our sports
both thought of very highly by both of us.
Yes, exactly. The Express, another emotional football movie about cancer, very sad. Game Plan with The Rock. Gridiron Gang, also with The Rock. Leatherheads. Big Fan, which is a movie about football fans starring Patton Oswalt. Very good movie, very dark, similar to something like 1 Hour Photo. The Waterboy, Rudy, Little Giants, The Best of Times, which I feel doesn't get talked about enough, which is Kurt Russell and Robin Williams. Very good football 80s movie about like reliving your past type stuff. And then the one that we joked about in text, Draft Day. The greatest
football movie of all time.
Sonny is the greatest GM ever put to film. I challenge you to come on and argue that with me because he makes the greatest moves that would probably never happen in real life.
Well, if we're talking about this, do we consider Jerry Maguire a football movie?
Jerry Maguire is another one that falls in there. It's more of a love story that surrounds football. Same as Silver Linings Playbook as well. Another movie that football is kind of at the center of it, but it's not the main part of the movie.
And again, we're on this talk. Let's not forget 2003's Radio.
Radio. I wasn't a huge fan of that one, but yeah, you're right. It's
There's
decent.
also that's more basketball than football, but it's got a sport in it, so I guess we should talk about it.
It's football. It's just not. It's just I don't know. I wasn't a big fan. That was to me that just felt like an Oscar grab by Cuba Gooding Jr. But
I don't know. I thought Cuba Gooding Jr. did a fantastic job.
Yeah. Okay.
And Ed Harris did the relationship that
they built. Yeah. You mentioned North Dallas 40 yesterday. I haven't seen that one, but there's another football movie.
It's a very gritty, behind the scenes, raucous life of what a professional sports team goes with, how they behaved in the 70s.
Yeah. So you can imagine, I'm sure.
A lot of pills, a lot of drinking, a lot of debauchery.
All right, so my final film that I'm going to talk about is one of my favorite football movies of all time. We're going to stay in high school. It's called Friday Night Lights from 2004. It is directed by Peter Berg, and it stars Billy Bob Thornton, Garrett Hedlund, Derek Luke, Jay Hernandez, Lucas Black, and Tim McGraw. As preseason practice begins for the Permian High School football team in August 1988, the town of Odessa, Texas, has high expectations for the players and their coach, Gary Gaines, to win a state championship with their star running back, James Booby Miles, played by Derek Luke. The quarterback, Mike Winchell, runs under the expectation of handing off the ball to Miles on most plays. Fullback Don Billingsley, played by Garrett Hedlund, struggles with his ball handling and is abused by his alcoholic father Charles, played by Tim McGraw, who gives a really, really good performance in this movie.
Yeah, amazing.
His dad won.
I really hated Tim McGraw in this movie.
Oh, you want to hate him, yeah. His dad won the state championship with Permian when he was a kid, so he wants his son to do it, and he's very hard on his son. The players frequently party as they deal with the pressures of Odessa's expectations. So this movie it shows how big football is in Texas in high school. It's treated like a professional sport. The players have the pressure put on them like they do in the NFL, except they're not getting paid to play like they do in the NFL. But they're expected to play and win like that. This movie, it starts out, Mike Winchell's character, his mother is sick, and he has to take care of her, so he doesn't really like to go out that much. He basically plays football, goes to school, and stays home. And then you have Billingsley, played by Garrett Hedlund, who's the alcoholic one, goes out drinking, partying, doesn't really want to be like the great athlete because his father's a piece of shit. And he kind of wants to he likes playing football, but he wants to defy his father as much as he can just because of that. But in a way, he's starting to become like him, which becomes a big plot point in the movie. Jay Hernandez plays Chavez, who is like a safety on the team, and he's like the smart one of the group. They're all kind of dumb jocks, but Chavez is real smart and tries to get the guys to kind of like be, good and like go to class and not get drunk all the time. But he also goes out with them all the time too. So that's, kind of part of being with the team, I guess. And Derek Luke is Booby Miles. I think he's the character people remember the most because he's loudmouth, he talks a lot of crap, and then he gets hurt. And then you get to kind of see what happens, as you talked about with the program. Except this one's real. This happened to this character. This is based on a true story. It's based on a book, which was based on a true story. Booby Miles was set to be the next big college running back, and he blows his knee out, and he never played again. And I think he ended up being a coach, but you get to see what he went through. And his uncle is the one that is taking care of him, and his uncle kind of has to be the one that talks him down from like losing it, because he's like ready to just throw it all away, doesn't know what to do with his life anymore. And it's just another very emotional sports movie. Billy Bob Thornton is great as the head coach here, and his wife is played by the same woman that plays the wife on the TV show. Connie Britton plays Sharon Gaines. Connie Britton played the same, I don't know if it's the same character, but they made a TV show out of this movie, and she was the wife on the TV show as well.
Yep.
And, Billy Bob Thornton, he's just trying to teach these kids how to, the biggest theme that we talk about, or the biggest theme that takes place in a lot of the movies we've talked about today, Remember the Titans, The Program, Friday Night Lights, is that they're trying to teach these young kids on not just how to be football players, but how to be men. And that's a big theme in these sports movies like this, and going over to something like Coach Carter in the basketball genre of sports films. That's big in that movie. It's about teaching these kids to be young men, to be, to understand that there's more to life than football. But yes, football is important, but when you leave high school and go to college, there's a great chance, like, none of these kids went to the NFL. So their careers ended at the latest in college. And that's what you have to look forward to. You have to teach them to be ready for life after football. And that's something that's talked about very much so in Varsity Blues. And this movie, we get to kind of see, it's very realistic. The way that he shoots this movie, it's shot like a documentary. The football scenes are shot like a documentary. It looks real. Everything looks real. And it's just a really great movie. If you haven't seen this movie, you've been living under a rock. I love this movie. You need to watch it. Check it out. All right, so we're going to go on to what's next, and that is our review of the week. Unfortunately, there were no football movies to tie in, so we did The Devil All the Time. It is directed by Antonio Campos, produced by Jake Gyllenhaal, starring Tom Holland, Bill Skarsgård, Riley Keough, Jason Clarke, Sebastian Stan, Haley Bennett, Eliza Scanlon, Mia Wasikowska, and Robert Pattinson. So basically, Spider-Man, Pennywise, John Connor, Winter Soldier, and Batman are in one movie together.
I was thinking the exact same thing.
This movie okay, so let's go to the plot of the movie first, because that needs to be explained, because it jumps around a lot. In 1945, while serving in the Solomon Islands during the Second World War, U.S. Marine Willard Russell finds the still-breathing body of Gunnery Sergeant Miller Jones, who was scalped and crucified by the Japanese. So Willard has to kill him. Willard is played by Bill Skarsgård. The first 45 minutes are, like, you look at that cast and you're like, all right, I'm ready for a Tom Holland movie with all these other actors. The first 45 minutes are Bill Skarsgård and Haley Bennett, who are, you'll find out later, are Tom Holland's character's parents. It's what is described as a Southern Gothic thriller. And it basically stars a bunch of British, Australians, and one Swedish man doing really thick Southern accents and doing them quite well, actually. There wasn't one accent in this movie that I thought was like way too much. No. I thought they all handled it pretty well. There are a couple Americans, Haley Bennett and Sebastian Stan, but
it always seems like British actors can adapt better to our American dialects, whereas vice versa, it's usually pretty obvious that...
Yes, that when there's some Southern accents our actors have been pretty bad. But I think in this movie, they all handle them pretty well. So like I said, the first 45 minutes, you basically get the backstory of Willard, who is Bill Skarsgård, and his wife is played by Haley Bennett. They meet in like a restaurant, and he falls in love with her almost instantly. He's from West Virginia. She's from Ohio, Meade, Ohio. And so those are the two...
West Virginia!
Those are the main two places in this story. It gets pretty depressing and pretty sad pretty quickly. It doesn't go well the first 45 minutes. And I don't mean the movie's bad. I mean, like, just the plot. It's very sad.
Yeah, it's not a motivator or an uplifter.
No, it's not a happy movie to start with. Like, it really isn't. So if you're one of those people that doesn't like watching depressing movies, it's probably not the movie for you.
Or if it's a trigger for you.
Yes, or if it's a trigger.
We're going into it.
It deals with suicide. It deals with a lot of death and murder. I will say this, don't get attached to many of the characters. So that should tell you what kind of movie...
So you're saying it's like Game of Thrones, sir.
Basically, yes. 2 hour, 18-minute version.
The ending is going to be absolutely terrible and ruin the whole franchise for me?
All right, so what I like to say about this movie, I thought the performances were all really good. Tom Holland does a very good job when he finally comes into the movie, which, like I said, is 45 minutes. Probably takes about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes before we see Pattinson's character. He plays a really creepy preacher, which I think he plays really well. And
I hope he portrays Batman as well as he portrayed this creepy pastor.
I'm telling you, man, I know you haven't watched a lot of his movies since Twilight. Not saying you watched Twilight, but that's what everyone knows him for. He's become a really phenomenal actor over the years, and this was just...
Excuse me, let me stop you right there. He's Cedric Diggory from Harry Potter.
Oh, sorry.
He's clever.
Which he was good in. He was good as Cedric. But he's really come a long way, and this movie, I think, is a good showcase for him. It shows that he doesn't always have to play like... even in most of the movies that I'm talking about, he's still like the good guy. He's not a good guy in this movie. And not to say that he's completely horrible, but he's a scumbag. He's a scumbag preacher. And I thought he did a really good job. I thought Bill Skarsgård did a great job in the beginning. Very depressing, very sad performance from him. Sebastian Stan, I'll be honest, I didn't recognize him at first. I'm like, I think that's Sebastian Stan. But then when he came in later, I was like, yeah, that's definitely him. And I think I even had to go to IMDb just to make sure. He does a really good job. He's pretty unrecognizable, like I said in the beginning. He looks like he put on maybe a little bit of weight around his face. So maybe that's why. And it wasn't as chiseled looking like he is as Winter Soldier. It jumps around a lot. It goes between West Virginia and Meade, Ohio. And it jumps from 1945 to the 1960s. It goes like 1945, then 1957, because we meet Tom Holland's character when he's like 9. And then it goes into the 60s where he's like 20, I think. And then he has... kind of like a stepsister or a sister played by Eliza Scanlon. And she's very religious, very about this new preacher, and some things happen. It kind of goes for a little bit of dark comedy, I think, in the scene that I don't want to give away what happens. But it's kind of like...
I know what you're talking about, yeah.
You're kind of like, wait, what? And that's really like the little bit of dark humor you get, because when I was watching this movie, my first thought was it's very much set up like a Coen Brothers movie.
Yes, absolutely.
It feels very Coen Brothers. The characters are very Coen Brothers. A lot of murder happens, which is very popular in Coen Brothers movies. And the way it usually happens is it's almost not accidental murder, but it catches you off guard. And some of the violent images, I'm sure, Wayne, because I know you don't always watch these type of like bloody movies. There are some violent images in this movie that I think catch a lot of people off guard. I thought it was a very well done movie. I've seen this type of story done before. It also reminded me of A Place Beyond the Pines with Ryan Gosling and Bradley Cooper in the way the story's told. That movie is told through like 3 different like story plot points in generations. And that kind of reminded me of this because it takes us from 1945 to 1967 or 1965, whatever the time frame is. We get to kind of meet Tom Holland's character and see what he's become after what has happened in the first 45 minutes of the movie. Again, I'm not going to spoil anything for you. I like this movie. I thought it was done really well. The performances I thought were really good. I liked how it looked. You know, the scenery, like the Midwest scenery, is really good for film. It may be kind of boring if you're driving through it, but when you're making a movie, shooting in the woods and shooting in those kind of rural areas are really good for film. It really helps set the tone for the movie. It's not an uplifting movie at all, so definitely don't watch it to be happy, because you won't be happy by the end. But yeah, I thought it was really well done. Wayne, what do you think about the movie?
Just touching on how you compared it to A Place Beyond the Pines. I don't know why, but Frailty, 2001 Matthew McConaughey film, was jumping into my head with just the way it was told and how, like...
Yeah. No, I could see that too. Very similar type of story.
I mean, you basically hit the nail on the head as to what I was going to say as well. I don't know what I was expecting going into it, but as I watched this film, it wasn't anything I expected. It was very well done. You know, like you said, Robert Pattinson shines, as he typically does. Yeah, I mean, I was just drawing connections or similarities to the movie Frailty.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and especially I could totally see it too with the characters played by Jason Clarke and Riley Keough, the serial killers. Yep. We didn't touch on them at all, but it also deals with 2 serial killers that are kind of going around Ohio and the Midwest, picking up hitchhikers, murdering them, and taking photos. And so that's obviously very disturbing.
Very much the way Bill Paxton in Frailty gets, messages from God, apparently.
Yes, and that was part of... They did work that in there a little bit, where it was like people... He was kind of upset at people not being good enough Christians, almost. Is like a weird undertone of that. And it was interesting in how it all plays out. Riley Keough, I think, is really good here. She doesn't get probably as much screen time as she deserves, but she... in the little screen time she has, she does a really good job. And Jason Clarke's always good. I mean, he's a solid Australian actor. If you've seen him in one thing, you know he's a really great performer. Been around for quite some time. Really good. Just all around, just a really solid movie. Another Netflix original. Just this year we're reviewing a lot of Netflix originals or Amazon movies because there isn't a lot of anything else coming out. So. This one, however, this one was always a Netflix original. It wasn't one of those like pulled from theaters or anything. So a good showcase for Tom Holland, I think, to show that he's more than just the guy in the Spider-Man suit who could jump and spin and stuff. And it just really good film all around. I enjoyed it. Sometimes it's nice just to watch. It's fun to watch movies like The Old Guard or Project Power, which we reviewed a couple weeks ago, that are just entertaining. Like this one, it was nice to just have a good, solid, like thriller movie. I feel like we haven't really had all year, so it was really good.
Absolutely.
All right, well, you can check that out on Netflix, everybody, if you're interested. Wayne and I obviously like it, and we recommend it. All right, so we're going to move right along into the Gone But Not Forgotten part of our show. We're going to talk about the great Philip Seymour Hoffman. However, I believe we should start with giving our respects to the late RBG. And we lost Ruth Bader Ginsburg 2 days ago. And obviously it's a huge hit. And I don't like to, politicize things, but obviously it's already being politicized. It's big in this country that Donald Trump will now get a chance to name a 3rd person to the Supreme Court, and that's terrible. Rest in peace to RBG. I mean, she did a lot for women, did a lot for women's rights. She's very well respected by us and by a lot of people throughout the country. It's a huge loss, and it sucks.
Yeah, I'm a little bit more vocal about things, and I don't know how to be quiet about things. And if your viewpoints differ than mine right now, I don't mean to offend you, but the hypocrisy of leadership right now. How in 2016, when a similar situation occurred, we can't choose a new justice until after the new president, after the election. Now, all of a sudden, 4 years later, well, we're going to push it through, and I look like a turtle because I have no chin and I have no integrity because my name is Mitch McConnell and I'm a walking piece of excrement.
Yeah. Lindsey Graham actually said, hey, you're recording this. This is recorded. You could use this against me if I change my opinion in 4 years. Guess what, Lindsey? You changed your opinion.
I mean, it is nice to see whether they stick to this. A few of the GOP senators saying that, you know what was said in 2016 holds true. Just because we have a Republican president doesn't mean it's different than when we had a Democratic president.
I'm hoping for Romney. That's who I'm hoping for. Susan Collins, I think they could sway her.
I don't trust her.
No, me either. But Romney, I think, can holds tough because he doesn't really like Trump at all.
Yeah.
So.
I'm sorry. Just where is the integrity? I'm going to stop because this is not a political podcast.
It's not a political podcast, and we tried
if
to...
I have offended you, well, I want to say sorry, but you know what? Maybe look into who you're supporting.
Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
we've recorded some podcasts where we talk about political stuff, and I usually take them out. I'm not going to take this part out because this is a big thing for us, for our history, and it's going to, hopefully they're able to stall it, but if it doesn't get stalled, it's going to shape the Supreme Court for years to come, and it's crazy to
really
think about that.
Disrespectful to Ruth Bader Ginsburg's memory that we don't even have a chance to mourn her.
No, you're right. You're right.
Concerned about what's going to happen when this fantastic person is,
And that's why I kind of apologize for being political, but not really, because it was politicized the moment she died, and that was, it's unfortunate. Like you said, it's unfortunate that we can't really just mourn her. We have to worry about the next step because it really could affect the rest of our country for a long time. All right, so we're done being political for now. We're moving on. To a great late actor who I think we both respect and enjoyed his performances while he was with us, his short 46 years, and that is the late Philip Seymour Hoffman. I've been a huge fan of his since the 90s, probably since Twister, even though, as an adult, I look back at that movie and I'm like, wow, I can't believe he was in Twister, like, negatively. But you know what? He's one of the best parts of Twister, so.
Yeah. Twister, and I'm sorry, 2000, Almost Famous as Lester Bang. Oh, outstanding.
He's great in Almost Famous, dude. That movie is fantastic.
And he's one of those forgotten characters because he only appears early on in the film.
Yes.
But just wow. I mean,
and he had a lot of roles.
Talk about the dynamic range that Mr. Hoffman had.
Yes.
Just whether he's a villain or a side character or just one of those like a Lester Bang type over the top supporting actors. Just fantastic range in everything that he did.
He was great, and he was a scene stealer, and that was evident in his first big blockbuster movie in Twister, a movie that was just a big dumb action movie about people chasing tornadoes, and it's very entertaining. I'm not saying the movie's bad, but that's what it was. And Philip Seymour Hoffman stood out in that movie. He stood out back then. He stands out now because my wife likes to watch that movie, a lot. And he still stands out in that movie because his performance is so fun, believable. He's so good in it. He gave his all to every performance, no matter the movie. Take Along Came Polly, for example. Along Came Polly is a rom-com. He's one of the funniest parts of that movie. He's probably the funniest part of that movie. And when he's shooting basketball and he's missing everything.
I need a tea. I'm burning.
He's great in that movie, and I think he took a role like that to flex his comedy muscle. Because as a serious actor like him, he never got the chance to do that all the time. He did it, Boogie Nights is a serious movie.
Scotty J.
Magnolia, serious movie. Before the Devil Knows You're Dead, one of the most serious movies ever. And when he got to flex his comedy muscle, I think it seemed like he enjoyed himself a little bit more. One of my favorite roles of his growing up was Big Lebowski. And he, like you said in Almost Famous, he's only in that a little bit. He's only in Big Lebowski for a little bit. He's not in it very much. He's very memorable in that movie. And he gives a really fun performance as Brandt, messed up movie Happiness he was in too. Also, he was in Patch Adams, which is a movie that gets a lot of shade these days. It's one of those movies I loved as a kid, and then I go to Rotten Tomatoes today, and it's like at 9% or something. Like, holy shit! Like, yeah, I know, right? I can't believe it either.
I haven't heard any shade or anything. I mean,
but it's a fun movie. But he's great as like this stiffy doctor who's just like, stuffy doctor. Different movie. That was Boogie Nights. He's great as the stuffy doctor who wants to settle down and not have fun. Who eventually ends up loosening up by the end of the movie. But one of my probably. Let me see here. Let me pick out a favorite performance of Philip Seymour Hoffman, because he's been in so many movies. Okay, and this isn't probably... I'm not going to say this is my favorite, but this is a movie I always think about, and I think about his performance the most. Charlie Wilson's War. Directed by Mike Nichols, starring Tom Hanks and Julia Roberts. He plays Gus Avracados, who is like the head like CIA guy who just like... the first time you meet him, he's like yelling at his boss, and his boss is just like laying in on him, and he can't believe he's trying to like get his point across, and he just walks over to like this glass door, and he just breaks it. And it's hilarious. Like it's so deadpan the way he does it. He's not laughing or anything. He just breaks it, and very deadpan. It's such a great scene. I have to watch it again because I'm not remembering it up for 100%, but. It was one of those movies I wasn't sure I was going to like, because I love most Tom Hanks movies, not all of them. He stood out in that movie, and he was the reason I really love that movie. And his performance is, no matter if it was Mission Impossible 3 or Doubt, which is a very serious movie about priest and pedophilia. Yeah. He gave his all. He always gave his all in every performance, and that's something that when you're a fan of an actor, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for an actor who's never gonna just rein it. What's the word I'm looking for? Never gonna phone it in. He never phoned it in. He gave his all every performance, and that's what I admired about him. That's why the day that he passed away, it was real sad for me as a film fan.
Shocking. I think it was the day of the Super Bowl they announced it in 2014.
It was February 2nd, so that makes sense then. Yeah, it was. I remember because that's what we were on my. Or no, I think I still went and saw a movie that day, but it was probably before the Super Bowl. I was on my way to my parents' house, and my sister either sent me a text or called me. Me and Rebecca were in the car and told me like what had happened, and I was like, oh my god. And then we went to go see Jack Ryan, the new Jack Ryan movie with Chris Pine. I looked up the movies yesterday just to see if I could narrow down what we would have seen that day. And that's the thing. That's how big of a deal it was for me. Is I remember what I was doing when it happened. Like, you don't. What are the events that you remember where you were when? And Philip Seymour Hoffman to me was that kind of actor. He was very powerful. His presence was always felt in every movie he was in. Like you said, Almost Famous. He's only in the beginning of that movie. It feels like he's in that entire movie just because that's one of the that's one of the memorable parts you pull out of that movie is his character. And
like in the sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to add on to that. When he's in the Hunger Games. When you think of the Hunger Games, you don't really think it's a Philip Seymour Hoffman movie, but he's in that, and he's terrific as always.
Some of his last movies, those are two of his last movies. He was filming those while he was apparently intoxicated, but I guess he was good at like holding off while filming, and then he would go afterwards. Which that's why it was a shock to people because people didn't realize that he was doing this. He had been clean for like 30 some years, I think.
Yeah, and just when they ultimately found him and the amount of heroin that he had, not only in his system but just at his premises.
I looked it up yesterday. He had like 5 different drugs in his system, and it was like heroin, cocaine, angel dust. Like it was just all this. Like it was like a ton of stuff. People that know more about drugs are probably laughing at me because I probably said something wrong. But regardless, he obviously had some demons, and a lot of these actors they do. And I think a lot of character actors tend to have more demons because they put themselves. Look at someone like Heath Ledger. They dive into these roles so much that when they come out the other side, they're not always the same person. And I don't know if that's what was going on with him or if he had some other demons he was fighting in his life, but it's just sad that, again, it's another actor. It's sad that we're never going to get another movie from him because he was so good. He was just starting to direct, get behind the camera, and we just never really got to see where he was going to go from there. But, I mean, other great performances, The Master from Paul Thomas Anderson, he worked with him a lot. He was in The Ides of March, which is a movie I really like. I didn't talk a lot about Moneyball right now because I talked about it during our sports podcast. Moneyball is one of my favorite sports movies, and he is great as the coach.
Yep.
So yeah, Hunger Games, Part 1 and Part 2 of Mockingjay were his last two movies. I mean, it was a big loss. It was a real big loss for us movie fans. And one of those ones that, like, I think following, 6 years after Heath Ledger, it was like, oh, geez, like, here's another just stud actor who we've lost.
Yeah, him and Keith Fletcher,
That Keith Fletcher. We'll get into the Keith Fletcher story when we talk about Heath Ledger in one of our other episodes. Maybe we'll do a Batman-themed episode after the Halloween episodes.
There we go. Yeah. The month of October is fast approaching, guys. If you haven't figured it out yet, we are big Halloween people. Kirky is a huge horror fan. Me, not so much, but I like to contribute as much as possible. Yeah, be prepared because we are going to hit it, and we are going to hit it hard. And yes. I didn't intend that to mean to sound so dirty, but we'll go with it.
It is what it is. We are going to be doing a lot of Halloween-themed stuff, talk a lot about horror movies, probably have our first guest, hopefully, yes. in that month. That's
definitely going to be to, have Kirky to give him someone to really discuss with because I am not the most knowledgeable of horror. Like, I know the classics, Dracula, the Wolfman, all that stuff, but more modern stuff, honestly, it messes with my head, so I kind of steer clear of that stuff. So.
He likes to sleep normal at night, weirdo. There is a rumor, though, that people that watch horror movies sleep better than everybody else, but I can tell you that's not true because I don't.
Yeah, usually on a bed of your own victims.
All right, so rest in peace, Philip Seymour Hoffman. We miss you, obviously. Moving on, though, we're going to go into movies we've watched this week. I don't honestly think I've watched that much, so this part will probably be somewhat quick this week. Let me just go to my little section here and take
While you're looking, the only thing I've really watched, I couldn't help myself. I started watching Cobra Kai again.
It's not a big week for me. So I watched The Intruder with Dennis Quaid, Michael Ealy, and Megan Good. Michael Ealy and Megan Good play a couple who move into Dennis Quaid's house. He's happy to sell it to them, but really what he's looking for is a new wife because he murdered his wife. And he's crazy. He plays crazy pretty good. It's a fun movie. Not much else there besides it being a fun thriller. It's okay.
Now, when I think crazy, I think Randy Quaid, not Dennis Quaid.
I think he studied his brother's actual crazy videos he posted just to be as crazy as him. Fantasy Island, the movie, pretty terrible. Don't watch it. Good idea, poor execution. I looked at the director's other movies. I haven't liked one of them, so I probably in the future I'll just stay away from his movies altogether. The last one I watched was Miss Bala, which is a remake of a Mexican film. This one stars Gina Rodriguez. It's a very fun, entertaining watch. It's a woman who is a makeup artist for her friend at a beauty pageant, and she gets involved in drug cartels and stuff. And it gets pretty crazy, lots of violence. It's PG-13, so it's not very bloody. Actually, all three of these movies are on Starz, so if you have Starz, go check them out. Except for Fantasy Island, you could skip that. I started watching Ratched last night, which is the Nurse Ratched TV series based on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. The first 2 episodes, pretty good. I like it. It's kind of like a body horror TV show, which is, if anyone knows, like the movies of David Cronenberg, pretty gory, pretty violent. Recommend it if you're into that type of stuff. Wayne, probably don't watch it because they'll probably freak you out. There are a couple of characters who vomit during some of the scenes and stuff. They'd probably be you, so don't do it. And I'm still catching up on Supernatural. Great show. If you haven't seen it, you should check it out. Recommendations this week, I really don't have a whole lot that I really looked into, I guess. But, just go watch a good movie. Maybe it's a movie you've seen before. Maybe it's something you heard that's good. Just head over to Netflix or Amazon Prime or whatever streaming service you have. There's a lot of good older movies on there. Lots of good newer movies as well. Halloween's coming up. October's coming up and then Halloween. But I consider October to be Halloween. So Halloween's coming up. And there's some good horror movies on all platforms. Netflix, HBO Max, Amazon Prime. just check them out. Go through. If you want free stuff, Vudu and Tubi have lots of good free horror movies, lots of older ones. And yeah, just that's what I recommend. You know, just watch a good movie. Whether it's just, if you don't have, take some time for yourself this week. Find a good movie to watch and enjoy yourself.
Yeah, man. Remember what Oprah says. How are you going to love somebody else if you don't love yourself?
Exactly. What Wayne said. So, I'm going to do the news and notes. Unless, Wayne, you have anything else to add or no?
I do not, sir. Let's move on to those news and notes.
All right, news and notes. Actually, I have a fun note from this week. Michael Cavallari, the actor who played the bully Ned in The Next Karate Kid, commented on my Instagram post, thanking us for talking about The Next Karate Kid. I thought that was kind of cool.
Really?
Yeah. I was like, oh, interesting. It was fun. I was like, I think that's the guy from The Next Karate Kid. Don't listen, though, because I'm not very nice to you on that. I apologize, Mr. Cavallari, if you actually listen to our show, which I doubt you do. You probably just commented because I posted a picture of The Next Karate Kid. Still kind of cool. This is the kind of things that, like, there's stuff I put on Twitter, you know, Wayne, you guys would give me a hard time about the hashtags I use and stuff, but I've actually gotten quite a bit of likes and some retweets and some tweets and stuff from the directors of the movies I've talked about, which for a movie geek like me, it's kind of cool to see like the director like something that I talk about. So this is, I thought that was kind of cool that he commented on my status, on my post. Yeah. So anyway.
Hashtag blue eyes, hashtag blue sky.
All right. The other news, Jonathan Majors, star of Lovecraft Country and Da 5 Bloods, cast as the villain in Ant-Man 3, Kang the Conqueror. So that'll be interesting. More Marvel news, Tatiana Maslany from Orphan Black and Perry Mason will star as She-Hulk for Marvel and Disney+. That's very big.
That's a fantastic casting.
It is. She is great. I can't wait for that. This last news I'm going to talk about, I called it, I think it was our first episode, or maybe it was around when we were talking about the DC stuff. DC Universe is no more. The DC Universe was a pay program that you could buy to watch original shows like Swamp Thing and Titans and the Harley Quinn show. All that's moving either to the CW or HBO Max. They're only going to be comic books now. I called this when we talked about HBO Max coming out, and they already had moved Doom Patrol to HBO Max. I'm like, this is not going to end well for them. It's over. Done with. Harley Quinn's already been moved to HBO Max. It's been renewed. Titans is next. So if you like those shows, get HBO Max, because that's where they're headed. All right, movies and TV shows coming out in the next couple weeks. The Trial of the Chicago 7, directed by Aaron Sorkin, starring Sacha Baron Cohen, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Michael Keaton, Eddie Redmayne, Yahya Abdul-Mateen II from Watchmen and Aquaman. He played Black Manta in Aquaman. He's one of the main stars of that. And Jeremy Strong hits Netflix October 7th. Christmas Chronicles 2 with Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn hits Netflix November 25th. If you like cheesy Christmas movies like I do, I thought the first one was pretty fun. Looking forward to the second one. Mandalorian Season 2, October 30th, Disney+.
This is the way!
Once Upon a Snowman, Frozen Disney original short about Olaf hits Disney+ soon. I didn't write a date down for that, so that'll be on there. Look for that if you like the Frozen series. This is a series I'm interested in right here. A docu-series about the Comedy Store is going to hit Showtime on October 4th. It's just called Comedy Store. I like hearing the old stories about the comedians and stuff, so I'm looking forward to that. On September 23rd, so next week, Console War, a documentary hits CBS All Access. It's about Nintendo and versus some of the other consoles that came out. And then, just recently announced, this is next year, The Boss Baby Family Business, March 26, 2021, in theaters.
Woo!
That's our show for this week. We're going to wrap up here. Thanks for listening. We appreciate it. We're looking forward to starting our Halloween horror movie episodes, which will be next week, because the next week's episode will air in October. So we are excited for that, and we are happy that you're all listening, and we hope you enjoy the show. So thanks for listening.
Absolutely. Thank you. As always, we invite your comments, both positive and negative. Let us know how we're doing, and let us know how we can improve.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great week.
Bye, y'all.